The smell of barbecue smoke drifted through the warm Los Angeles air as I adjusted my sundress for the third time, smoothing down invisible wrinkles that probably weren't even there. My hands were trembling slightly, though I told myself it was just the excitement of finally being included in one of Linda's famous family gatherings. After 3 years of marriage to Robert, I'd only been invited to a handful of these events, and each time felt like a small victory. Today was supposed to be different. Today, I was determined to prove that I belonged here, that I could be the daughter-in-law Linda had always wanted. The backyard was already buzzing with conversation and laughter, the kind of easy, familiar sounds that come from people who've known each other their entire lives. I took a deep breath and pushed through the sliding glass door, immediately hit by a wave of voices and the sizzling sound of meat on the grill. Robert was already deep in conversation with his Uncle William near the pool, their heads bent together in that serious way men get when they're discussing business or sports. I'd learned not to interrupt those moments. Linda had made it clear early on that the men needed their space to talk about important things. The women were clustered around the patio table, Linda holding court as usual with her perfectly styled silver hair catching the afternoon sunlight. She looked up as I approached, and for just a moment I caught something in her expression that made my stomach flutter with uncertainty. But then she smiled, that practiced smile I'd come to know so well, and gestured for me to join them. "Patricia, darling, you look lovely," Linda said, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when other people were listening. It was warm and welcoming on the surface, but there was something underneath it that always made me feel like I was being evaluated, measured against some invisible standard I could never quite reach. The other women, Robert's aunts and cousins, turned to greet me with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Some seemed genuinely happy to see me, while others offered polite nods that felt more like obligations being fulfilled. I settled into the empty chair they'd left for me, noting how it was positioned slightly outside their natural circle, as if I was a guest rather than family. The conversation resumed around me, flowing easily between shared memories and inside jokes that I couldn't quite follow. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself studying the dynamics of this family I'd married into, trying to decode the subtle signals and unspoken rules that seemed to govern every interaction. Linda was clearly the matriarch, her approval sought and her disapproval feared by everyone present. William, Robert's uncle, seemed to be her closest ally, the two of them exchanging meaningful glances across the yard whenever certain topics came up. I noticed how conversations would shift or die entirely when I tried to contribute, how my attempts at humor fell flat while the same jokes from others earned hearty laughs. It wasn't anything I could point to specifically. Everyone was perfectly polite, perfectly civil, but there was an undercurrent of something I couldn't name, something that made me feel like an outsider looking in through glass. The children were running around the pool, their shrieks of delight mixing with the adult conversations, and I found myself watching them with a mixture of longing and sadness. Robert and I had been trying for a baby for over a year now, but every month brought disappointment. I'd mentioned it to Linda once, hoping for some maternal wisdom or support, but she'd simply patted my hand and said that these things happened when they're meant to. The dismissive way she'd said it had stung, as if my desire for children was somehow presumptuous or premature. Now, watching the family's children being doted on by their grandparents and aunts, I wondered if Linda was secretly relieved that Robert and I hadn't been successful yet. The thought made my chest tight with a pain I didn't want to acknowledge. Robert caught my eye from across the yard and smiled, that easy, confident smile that had first attracted me to him at a coffee shop downtown 3.5 years ago. He looked so comfortable here, so naturally part of this world that still felt foreign to me despite all my efforts to fit in. Sometimes I wondered if he truly understood how difficult these gatherings were for me, how much energy it took to navigate the complex social dynamics of his family. When I'd tried to explain it to him before, he'd brushed off my concerns with reassurances that everyone loved me, and I was just being too sensitive. But standing here now, watching him laugh at something William had said, I couldn't shake the feeling that there were conversations happening that I wasn't privy to, decisions being made that affected me without my knowledge. The sun was beginning to sink lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the perfectly manicured lawn, when my cousin Sarah appeared at my elbow. Sarah was technically Robert's cousin, but she'd always been kind to me, one of the few family members who seemed to genuinely enjoy my company. She was younger than most of the others, closer to my age, and had always felt like a potential ally in this sometimes hostile territory. But today, something was different about her demeanor. She kept glancing around nervously, as if she was afraid of being overheard, and when she leaned in close to me, her voice was barely above a whisper. The urgency in her tone made my heart skip a beat, and I found myself leaning in to catch her words over the noise of the party. "Patricia," she said, her breath warm against my ear, "you need to leave, now, before they see you." The words hit me like a physical blow, so unexpected and cryptic that for a moment I thought I'd misheard her. But the look in her eyes, a mixture of fear and genuine concern, told me that she was deadly serious. My mind raced, trying to process what she could possibly mean. Before they see me? But I was already here, had been here for hours. Who was they, and what was I supposed to be hiding from? Sarah's hand was on my arm now, her grip tight and insistent, and I could see the conflict playing out across her face, as if she was wrestling with whether she should say more. The party continued around us, oblivious to this strange, urgent conversation happening in their midst. But suddenly, everything felt different, charged with a tension I couldn't understand. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it over the music and laughter. Sarah's words echoed in my mind like a warning bell, but before I could ask her what she meant, she was already moving away, melting back into the crowd with practiced ease. I stood there frozen, my drink trembling in my hand, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The party continued around me, as if nothing had changed, but everything felt different now. The laughter seemed forced, the smiles appeared strained, and I found myself studying every face for signs of deception. Who was coming that I needed to hide from? And why would Sarah, sweet, harmless Sarah, look so frightened when she warned me? My mind raced through possibilities, each one more unsettling than the last. I tried to catch Robert's attention, but he was still deep in conversation with William, their heads bent together in what looked like an increasingly serious discussion. From where I stood, I could see William's face, and there was something in his expression that made my skin crawl, a kind of calculating coldness that I'd glimpsed before but never really acknowledged. He was gesturing with his hands, speaking in low, urgent tones that Robert was absorbing with rapt attention. Every few seconds, William would glance in my direction, and when our eyes met, he would quickly look away, but not before I caught something that looked almost like guilt. The realization hit me like a slap. They were talking about me. Whatever conversation they were having, whatever Sarah was warning me about, I was at the center of it. Linda was still holding court with the other women, but I noticed she kept checking her phone, her perfectly manicured fingers tapping against the screen with increasing frequency. She would read something, frown slightly, then type back with the kind of focused intensity that suggested important business was being conducted. When she caught me watching her, she quickly put the phone away and flashed me that practiced smile again. But this time, I could see the strain behind it. "Patricia, dear, you look a bit pale," she said, her voice carrying just far enough for the other women to hear. "Perhaps you should sit down for a moment. The heat can be quite overwhelming for some people." The way she said "some people" made it clear she was talking about outsiders, people who weren't used to their family gatherings. The other women murmured their agreement, but I could see them exchanging glances that spoke of shared knowledge I wasn't part of. Mrs. Henderson, Robert's aunt, actually looked uncomfortable, as if she wanted to say something, but couldn't bring herself to do it. She kept opening her mouth slightly, then closing it again, her eyes darting between me and Linda with obvious distress. I'd always liked Mrs. Henderson. She was one of the few family members who had made genuine efforts to include me in conversations, who remembered details about my job and asked thoughtful questions about my life. But now, she looked like she was carrying the weight of some terrible secret, and the sympathy in her eyes made my stomach churn with dread. I excused myself and headed toward the house, needing a moment to collect my thoughts and figure out what was happening. The sliding door felt heavier than usual as I pulled it open, and the cool air conditioning inside provided a stark contrast to the warm afternoon outside. The house was quiet, except for the muffled sounds of the party drifting in from the backyard, and I found myself standing in Linda's pristine living room, surrounded by family photos that told the story of decades of gatherings just like this one. But as I looked at those photos more closely, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. In the older ones, from before I'd married Robert, the family looked relaxed and genuinely happy. But in the more recent photos, the ones that included me, there was something different about everyone's expressions. I moved closer to the mantelpiece, studying a photo from last Christmas that I remembered being taken. In it, I was standing next to Robert, both of us smiling at the camera, but now I could see what I'd missed before. Everyone else in the photo was looking slightly away from us, their smiles not quite reaching their eyes, as if they were posing for a picture they didn't really want to be in. Linda was positioned as far from me as possible while still being in the frame, and William wasn't even looking at the camera. He was staring at something off to the side with an expression of barely concealed irritation. The realization that this discomfort had been going on for years, that I'd been blind to it or chosen to ignore it, made me feel sick to my stomach. My phone buzzed in my purse, and I pulled it out to find a text from an unknown number. My hands were shaking as I opened it, and the message made my blood run cold. Check Robert's email. Password is your wedding date backwards. You deserve to know the truth. I stared at the screen, reading the message over and over again, trying to process what it meant. Someone was giving me access to my husband's private communications. Someone who knew our wedding date and thought I needed to see whatever was hidden there. The phone felt like it was burning in my hands, and I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Part of me wanted to delete the message and pretend I'd never seen it, but Sarah's warning kept echoing in my mind. Leave before they see you. The sound of car doors slamming in the driveway made me jump, and I rushed to the front window to see who was arriving. A black sedan was parked behind the other cars, and I watched as two people got out. A man and woman I didn't recognize, both dressed more formally than the casual barbecue attire everyone else was wearing. They moved with purpose toward the front door, and something about their demeanor made my skin crawl. These weren't family members or friends coming to join the party. These were people with business to conduct, and based on Sarah's warning and the strange behavior I'd been witnessing all afternoon, I had a terrible feeling that their business involved me. The doorbell rang, and I heard Linda's voice from the backyard calling out that she would get it, her tone bright and welcoming in a way that sounded completely artificial. I pressed myself against the wall next to the front window, my heart hammering as I tried to make sense of what was happening. Through the glass, I could see Linda greeting the two strangers with the kind of warm enthusiasm she usually reserved for her closest friends. But there was something performative about it, as if she was putting on a show. The woman was tall and blonde, probably in her 40s, with the kind of polished appearance that screamed expensive lawyer or business executive. The man beside her was older, distinguished-looking, carrying a leather briefcase that suggested this was definitely not a social call. Linda ushered them inside quickly, glancing around the neighborhood as if she was worried about being seen, and I barely had time to duck into the hallway bathroom before they entered the house. From my hiding spot, I could hear their voices drifting down the hallway, though I couldn't make out the specific words. Linda's tone had completely changed. Gone was the artificial sweetness, replaced by something businesslike and urgent. I heard footsteps moving toward the back of the house, toward Linda's home office, and then the sound of a door closing firmly. The silence that followed was somehow more ominous than the conversation had been, and I found myself straining to hear anything that might give me a clue about what was happening. My phone was still clutched in my hand, the mysterious text message glowing on the screen like an accusation. Someone wanted me to know the truth, but did I really want to find out what that truth was? The sound of the sliding door opening made me freeze, and I heard Robert's voice calling my name. "Patricia, where did you go, honey?" His tone was casual, but there was an underlying tension that I'd never heard before, as if he was trying very hard to sound normal. I heard his footsteps moving through the house, getting closer to where I was hiding, and I realized I had to make a decision. I could come out and pretend everything was fine, go back to the party and continue playing the role of the oblivious wife, or I could follow the breadcrumb trail that someone had left for me and find out what my husband and his family were really hiding. The bathroom mirror reflected my pale, frightened face back at me, and I barely recognized the woman staring back. "I'm in here," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady as I flushed the toilet for effect and ran the water in the sink. When I opened the door, Robert was standing right there, and the relief on his face was so obvious it was almost comical. But underneath the relief, I could see something else, a kind of guilty panic that made my stomach drop. He reached for me immediately, pulling me into a hug that felt more desperate than affectionate, and I could feel the tension in his body, the way his muscles were coiled tight with stress. "There you are," he murmured into my hair. "I was looking everywhere for you. Are you feeling okay? You seemed a little off earlier." The concern in his voice might have been touching if I hadn't been able to feel how fast his heart was beating against my chest. I pulled back to look at him, studying his face for signs of deception, and what I saw there made my blood run cold. This was the man I'd shared a bed with for 3 years, the man I'd trusted with my heart and my future. But right now he looked like a stranger. His eyes kept darting toward the back of the house where Linda had disappeared with her mysterious visitors, and there was a sheen of sweat on his forehead despite the air conditioning. "Who were those people who just arrived?" I asked, keeping my voice light and curious, as if I was just making conversation. The way his face went completely blank told me everything I needed to know. He was going to lie to me, just like he'd probably been lying to me for months or maybe even years. "What people?" he asked, but his voice cracked slightly on the words, and he couldn't quite meet my eyes. "I didn't see anyone arrive. Maybe it was just neighbors or something." The lie was so obvious, so clumsy, that I almost felt sorry for him. This was the man who'd convinced me he loved me, who'd promised to share his life with me, and he couldn't even come up with a believable story about 2 people I'd clearly seen him watching from the backyard. I felt something inside me break, not just my heart, but something deeper. My faith in my own judgment, my belief that I knew the person I'd married. If he could lie this easily about something so simple, what else had he been lying about? "Robert," I said quietly, reaching up to touch his face, "is there something you need to tell me? Something about your family? Or about us?" For just a moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Guilt, maybe, or regret, and I thought he might actually tell me the truth. His mouth opened slightly, and I held my breath, waiting for him to finally be honest with me. But then I heard Linda's voice calling from the backyard, sharp and commanding, and whatever moment of vulnerability I'd glimpsed disappeared immediately. His face hardened, and when he looked at me again, it was with the kind of cold calculation I'd seen in William's eyes earlier. "Everything's fine, Patricia," he said, his voice flat and final. "You're just being paranoid. Maybe you should go home and rest. You've seemed really stressed lately, and I think this party might be too much for you." The dismissiveness in his tone was like a slap, but it was the word paranoid that really stung. It was the same word Linda had used months ago when I'd tried to talk to Robert about feeling excluded from family events. The same word William had thrown around when I'd questioned why I was never included in family business discussions. They'd been gaslighting me, making me doubt my own perceptions, and my husband had been part of it all along. The betrayal was so complete, so devastating, that for a moment I couldn't even breathe. The word paranoid hung in the air between us like a weapon, and I felt something fundamental shift inside me. This wasn't the man I'd fallen in love with, the man who'd held me while I cried about my father's death, who'd promised to build a life with me. This was someone else entirely, someone who could look me in the eye and gaslight me with practiced ease. I stepped back from him, and I saw him register the movement, saw the flicker of panic cross his face as he realized he'd pushed too hard. "You know what, Robert?" I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the chaos in my chest. "You're absolutely right. I think I should go home." The relief that flooded his features was so obvious it was almost insulting. "That's probably for the best," he said quickly, already reaching for his keys. "I'll drive you home, and then I'll come back and help clean up." The casual way he offered felt like another small cruelty, another reminder that I would never truly belong in this family. But I shook my head, holding up my hand to stop him. "No, I'll drive myself. You stay and enjoy your family time." The emphasis I put on family made him wince, but he didn't argue. He was probably relieved that he wouldn't have to pretend to care about my feelings during the drive home. The drive home was a blur of Los Angeles traffic and racing thoughts, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. The mysterious text message burned in my mind, and by the time I pulled into our driveway, I'd made my decision. I needed to know what Robert was hiding, even if the truth destroyed everything I thought I knew about my marriage. Our house felt different as I walked through the front door, as if I was seeing it through new eyes. The photos on the walls, the furniture we'd chosen together, the life we'd built, it all felt like a lie now. Robert's laptop was sitting on the kitchen counter where he always left it, and my hands were shaking as I opened it. The password prompt appeared, and I typed in our wedding date backwards, just as the mysterious text had instructed. When the inbox opened, I knew there was no going back. The most recent emails were from Linda, William, and several addresses I didn't recognize, all with subject lines that made my blood run cold. Patricia situation update, legal consultation results, timeline for implementation. I clicked on the most recent one from Linda, and what I read there made me sink into a chair. They weren't just excluding me from the family, they were actively plotting to destroy me, building a case to paint me as mentally unstable so they could divorce me without paying alimony. The final email from Robert to Linda, sent just hours ago, broke me completely. I can't keep pretending much longer. It's getting harder to act like I care about her when I know what's coming. I sat there in the silence of my kitchen, staring at the screen until the words blurred through my tears. And then something extraordinary happened. The rage that had been building inside me crystallized into something cold and sharp and powerful. They thought they were so clever, so careful in their planning, but they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated me. I picked up my phone and called the number that had sent me the anonymous text, and when Sarah answered on the first ring, I wasn't surprised. "I saw everything," she said before I could speak, her voice thick with guilt and determination. "I've been documenting their meetings for months, recording conversations, saving emails. I couldn't stand watching them destroy you like this." She'd been gathering evidence of their conspiracy, waiting for the right moment to expose them, and now we had everything we needed to turn their own game against them. 2 hours later, I was sitting across from the best divorce attorney in Los Angeles, Sarah beside me as my witness, with a folder full of evidence that would not only protect me, but destroy Robert's family in the process. The emails, the recorded conversations, the documented conspiracy to commit fraud and perjury. It was enough to ensure that Robert would lose everything, not me. When my phone rang and Robert's name appeared on the screen, I answered with a smile in my voice. "Hello, darling," I said sweetly, watching as my attorney nodded approvingly. "I hope you enjoyed your family barbecue, because it's going to be the last one you have for a very long time." The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. The hunter had just become the hunted, and this time, I was the one holding all the cards.